Greetings and welcome to the edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host Rashid, and here's your co-host Rashid, and we're doing a breaking live telecast. We want to let you know that according to sources, and now I've let Rashid know this about 20, 30 minutes ago or something like that. But now RT is confirming some of the information that we got that the strategic dumbass city of Bakhmut has fallen, or what is it called in Russian? Arkiamis. Arkiamis. The strategic city of Bakhmut has fallen. And you're going to hear a lot of spinning going on. I believe that is why uh, the popular Russian journalist, war correspondent, was killed in the little St. Petersburg cafe. What America can't accept losses. The Western world can't accept losses. And they're like little spoiled brats when they can't get their way, and when things doesn't happen for them the way that they believe they should, they do crazy things. But Rashid, I'm getting a lot of feedback in your computer. I'm hearing a lot of sound in your computer.
I don't see why there's nothing on in here.
There we are. There we are. We're good now. But as I was saying, there's a lot going on, and we got word of it maybe an hour ago or 2 hours ago, and I was discussing it with Rashid via text message because actually both Rashid was busy and I was busy, and then I saw the confirmation of it on Russia Today, and as a matter of fact, I'll bring it up. I'll read it to you, okay? And we're talking about Arkiamis in Russian, the former Soviet city of Arkiamis. I believe that's the way we say Artemis, but I think they call it Arkiamis or something like that. And the Ukrainians renamed it Bakhmut. And so on Russia Today, the article is titled, it was a breaking article, it's titled, Wagner Chief Declares Bakhmut Formally Captured. And here it reads like this. Yevgeny Prigozhin dedicated the seizure of the key Donbass city's administration to the killed Russian war blogger. We were talking about, we just mentioned him. It says the head of the Russian private military company, PMC, or the Wagner Group, as we know it as, Evgeny Prigozhin has announced a milestone achievement in the battle for the city of Arkiamis, known in Ukraine as Bakhmut, publishing a video allegedly taken in front of the town's administrative building on Sunday evening. It goes further and says, we hoisted the Russian flag with the inscription, good memory to Vladimir Tatarsky, and the flag of PMC Wagner on top of the city administration of Bakhmut, Prigozhin said in the clip. Prigozhin's announcement comes just hours after prominent Russian military blogger Tatarsky, real name Maxim Fomin, was killed in an apparent improvised explosive device blast in a cafe in St. Petersburg on Sunday afternoon. I'm gonna come back to that part in just a second, but I want to read the whole cover of the information that we got earlier. So it says, legally speaking, Bakhmut is taken. The enemy is concentrated in the western district, meaning that they have a mop-up situation there. But this means that thousands of Ukrainian troops are pretty much encircled. And are we looking at a Mariupol situation or something like that? I don't know. But let's go a little further in the article. It says, the battle for Arkiamis or Bakhmut has emerged as one of the most intensive and bloody engagements of the armed conflict in Ukraine, with both sides reportedly suffering significant casualties. Western officials have claimed that the city poses no strategic value. Now, they say that now, but I remember months ago when it looked like that the Russians couldn't take the city, it was of the most strategic concern. As a matter of fact, the stripper president of Ukraine, Zelensky, was in an interview just recently, a few days or a few weeks ago, when he talked about the significance of Arkiamis or Bakhmut, that if that falls, then that puts everything else in jeopardy in Ukraine, and that the Russians will have an open field to advance. So So it's pretty much strategic, but you know the British and the U.S. and the Western press will try to downplay it. But let's go further. It says the battle for Archiamis or Bakhmut has emerged as one of the most intensive and bloody engagements of the armed conflict in Ukraine, with both sides reportedly suffering significant casualties. Western officials have claimed that the city poses no strategic military value, but Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, just like I said, pledged to defend it as long as possible after proclaiming the city a fortress. Kiev's attempt to cling onto Bakhmut, regardless of the losses, has almost destroyed the Ukrainian army, Prigozhin claimed earlier this week. However, Wagner fighters who led the charge to capture the Donetsk People's Republic city also took a serious beating, he acknowledged. Now, let's go back to something. When I was reading this article, there was a point in here that I wanted to come back to. Where was it? Okay, Prigozhin's announcement comes just hours after the prominent Russian military blogger Tatarsky was killed in an improvised explosive device blast in a cafe in St. Petersburg on Sunday afternoon. Listen, Rashid, I don't know about you, but it seems that reeks of desperation. In the United States, in the Western media, always touting press freedom when it's in their favor, and that the press must be protected at all costs. And yet, as they see, they had to know that Bakhmut was close to falling at the time, so they took out vengeance and hit in the second largest city in Russia to show Russia that we can hit too. We can hit back too. What say you on the matter on this breaking news of the fall of Bakhmut?
I say, oh no, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. I was just reading another article with one of the empire's mouthpieces talking about how
Speak up.
that they were just Bakhmut was on. It was the Ukrainians had made a valiant effort, and they was about to hurl back that Russian onslaught, and that thousands and thousands of Russians have been killed, and that there's going to be a mop-up operation for the Kiev forces to come in and wipe them, push them all back to Crimea, and then back into Russia. Well, it looks like somebody is opposed, has a propensity of lying, and it ain't the Russians. It ain't the Russians that's sitting up blowing smoke up your butt. That's the empire's motto: lie, lie, and lie some more. And then when you get caught in lies, tell some more lies. Would say the bigger the lie, the more people will believe it. That's the empire.
Yeah. And the U.S., the British intelligence, NATO intelligence had to know the dire situation, because all week long and prior to this week, all we've heard is Ukraine crying about the precarious situation that they find themselves in and moved in the surrounding areas. And this blast that took place in St. Petersburg, I think that is a result to try to strike out. You know how you're getting beat up, so you can't throw blows with a person, but you see that you can sneak and scratch them. And I believe that is a scratch from the empire, because she's getting her tail torn and tucked between her legs. Now, what's crazy about this is that there was something that was being tried before. There was an operation, I believe it was yesterday or day before yesterday, to try to get the Russians off their pivot. There were two covert operations simultaneously that tried to infiltrate Russian-held areas, and they were beat back brutally. As a matter of fact, 2 units were completely destroyed of the Ukrainian and Western forces. Don't you think, again, let's go back, don't you think that this blast in St. Petersburg is to take the media attention away from what should be announced soon, that Bakhmut, the strategic city of Artemis or Bakhmut, has fallen? Don't you think that the West want to put more emphasis on a terror operation that took out a Russian journalist who was a war correspondent, to me, it's misdirection. You know, the magician does this all the time. The sleight of the hand, the misdirection. When he wants to do something over here, he has your attention over there. Yeah.
Three-card Molly. Yeah.
So what do you say about this situation?
Old shell game. That's all that is. He's sliding the peas around the shells and find a pea, and which one it is in, 1, 2, or 3 is in neither, is in his hand. But that's the same. That's like I said that before. That's the model of the empire. Also, with this this American journalist being captured, that's big. Little bitty. They gonna put him over there and he'll spy, and they don't say nothing. But the whole thing shows desperation. His dollar is collapsing. Nobody gonna want it in a few days. I'm not talking about 10, like they was talking about 10, 15 years. The dollar might be replaced. Say like 5 or 6 months it might be replaced completely. Nobody wants it. This is happening fast. Real fast. And before you know it, you look around and the empire gonna be sunk, like one of those battle ships that they used to have on that game. I sink your battleship.
Yeah.
Well, this looked like it was gonna happen to America. She's sinking. All around the world, everybody is throwing her off. Nobody, like we said before, the game is up. You can only fool the people so long. And now that China and Russia, you can't go and do what you did with Gaddafi with China and Russia. You can't go and do what you did with Saddam with China and Russia. You had the edge on military on those little countries. You ain't got the edge on China and Russia. And then China and Russia is big enough to bring others into their sphere. Mm-hmm. And so if you say you're going to slap them, well, we all together. Mm-hmm. He can't slap everybody down. And so he's in trouble.
And following up on what you said, the Epoch Times, or whatever you want to pronounce it, has an article out. It says China, Russia leading push to replace U.S. dollar as the world reserves currency. And in the article, it says, is the world challenging the U.S. dollar's dominance? Over the last decade, several nations worldwide, led primarily by Russia and China, have ramped up efforts to kick their dependence on the chief international reserve currency, from diminishing the prevalence of non-dollar transactions to reducing dollar holdings in foreign exchange reserves, or employing measures to erode the buck's influence in worldwide trade. It says, Jim O'Neill, a former chief economist at Goldman Sachs, suggests that the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa bloc, should expand its presence and enhance the alliance's work to threaten the greenback hegemony in global finance markets. It goes further and says, writing in a March 26 paper at the Global Policy Journal, O'Neill championed adding new members to the group to bolster its objectives if these countries might meet the initial criteria of maintaining large populations and have promising economies. The U.S. dollar plays a far too dominant role in global finance, O'Neill wrote. When the Federal Reserve has embarked on periods of monetary tightening or the opposite, loosening, the consequences on the value of the dollar and the knockoff effects have been dramatic. If the BRICS pact grows, which it is, we see it's growing, it could facilitate the emergence of a multi-currency global financial system, he added. And then he goes further and says, let me scroll down a little bit. Russia's deputy chairman of the State Duma, Alexander Babakov, championed the proposal of the BRICS partnership producing its own currency. Its composition should be based on inducting new monetary ties established on a strategy that does not defend the U.S. dollar or euro. Remember on the show we were talking about how the pound, the euro, and the dollar are all in bed together and they're all interconnected. If one coughs, the other one sneezes. If one coughs, the other one gets a cold. This is what we're talking about. Let's go a little further. He says, its composition should be based on inducting new monetary policy ties established on a strategy that does not defend the US dollars or euro, but rather form a new currency competent of benefiting our shared objectives. Now, with that said, there's more to this article. There's more to this article, and I'm reading it for the first time with you all, and we're doing this breaking news thing. Just let's go a little further. I just want to read a little bit more of this because it has something about South Africa. South Africa will host the 15th annual BRICS summit from August 22nd to August 24th. Last year, Russian President Vladimir Putin revealed in an address to BRICS Business Forum participants that creating the international reserve currency based on the basket of currencies of our countries is under review. So now you see why the United States deems Russia and China as a threat. Now you see why the Western world is, and when you say Britain and Germany and all of them, and you're saying, why would they cut off cheap Russian oil? They're spiting off their nose and tongue in spite of their face, because they understand that if the dollar is under assault, the pound, British pound, the British run the pound. Well, guess what else is under assault? The euro, which is under German control. So, which is under all of European, but we know that Germany is the economic engine of Europe, and it is being deindustrialized. So all of this is taking place right now as we are finding out that the strategic city of Artemis, or Bakhmut, has essentially fallen. That's the breaking news for all of you who are listening. Rashid, I'll let you chime in just a minute, but I want to go to something that Harold Turner said. And this is an article that just came out today on Harold Turner, the HaroldTurnerShow.com. White House admits countries worldwide are refusing US dollar. Listen to this. It says, White House spokeswoman Karen Jean-Pierre was asked what the Biden regime was doing about countries switching away from the US dollar and using their own currency as settlement of foreign trade. Her response was stunning. Switching to national currencies is a violation of the rights of American citizens, quote unquote. I'm gonna say that again. Hold on. I'm gonna read that one again. If that is not the height of arrogance and intransigence and exceptionalism, I don't know what is. So I'm gonna read that again. I gotta read that for the audience who are listening and viewing this. Check this out. White House spokeswoman Karen Jean-Pierre was asked what the Biden regime was doing about countries switching away from the US dollar and using their own currency as settlement of foreign trade. Her response was stunning. And quoting this is quote unquote now. Switching to national currencies is a violation of the rights of American citizens. The White House then threatened with sanctions those countries that refuse the dollar and mutual settlements. I'm not making this up. I am not making any of this up. What say you, Rashid, on the lunacy and the madness of what was just spoken by these people?
The emperor has no clothes. Everybody sees him who he is. That's what the American is against the American people's rights. But what about it, the people of Iraq's rights not to be bombed into the Stone Age? What about the people of Libya's rights not to be bombed and turned into a third world, a no world country? What about Afghan? What about everybody else's rights? You know, interview in India, where he was saying that how America goes around and bullies everybody around the world, and the commentator act like he was from London instead of India. Well, what do y'all do about it? It's the slave master mentality, where the slave talks like he's the master himself. It's well, you should stop bombing. You should tell them to stop bombing. Well, you go sit up there and we gotta stop. We gotta start somewhere. Go tell him to start it. Russia didn't start the war, did he?
Nope.
He the one that started the war. They had been bombing the Donbass for what, 8 years?
Where was 7 years prior to Russia's intervention?
Where was this guy from India and his ilk when they was doing all that bombing? He said nothing. And Lavrov asked him, well, when you are bombing up Libya, where were y'all at? He had nothing to say. When you was bombing up, when the empire was bombing up Syria, what did you have to say? He had nothing to say. When you was bombing up Afghanistan, you had nothing to say. When you was bombing up Iraq, what did you have to say? Ain't having, but you got to stop the bombing now. You see, these guys are psychopaths, and their minions think like them. Yep. Their minions think that they should be able to do anything they want around the world, and nobody should say anything. That's what that is. He have the right. He thinks that he's the sovereign. I am your king. You do what I tell you to do. Well, I don't want to. How dare you not do what I want you to do? I'll bomb you into the stone. That's basically what she's saying. How dare other people want to stand up for their rights?
Mm-hmm. And how dare other nations want economic sovereignty? Because to push the dollar out of your trade, the United States does not get a cut. People don't realize this, that as the world reserve currency, the United States is everybody's national business, I should say. They get a cut of the transacted deal. They get a small cut of the transacted deal, and they can monitor what is traded and how much it is traded for, and then they can manipulate trade, and they can manipulate interest rate and prices by having this thing, so they can overthrow governments and they can put other governments in power. So, and go ahead.
As Lavrov was saying on that interview, where many countries were saying that, telling him behind the scene, well, they putting pressure on us. Well, they say that, you got children to go to Stanford, don't you? We know where you bank at. You see, they can intimidate you by sticking his hand down your pocket. When he stole $300 billion from Russia, the rest of them say, well, I think we need a new bank. And that's what's taking place. We need a new banker. And that's what it is. What the people really don't realize, see, people have no concept of what this means. If no one accepts the American dollar, then the American empire dies.
Right.
All of them bases around the world will become no bases around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She won't have any money to fund this huge military 10 times over than everybody else combined. If she is not rich, that's the lie she's been putting out. She has no commodities or nothing to sell to anybody else. The rich country is the one that have all that oil up under their ground,
and all those mineral resources.
Oh, that's right. The one that has all the wheat and all that stuff to be said. America ain't got nothing, and then run around claiming that she. Well, I tell you, let me back that up. America got a bunch of dead presidents on her dollar bills and claim that it's worth something. But if everybody else won't accept it, then what is it worth?
On one of our shows, you and I talked about this, and I said this is like the greatest con that anybody has ever set up. This is the greatest con, because most people don't take the time out and sit and think about how this global financial system is set up, and how the Western world has conned the entire world, fooled them for centuries.
Hoodwinked.
Yeah, hoodwinked them for centuries. I want everybody to, for a second. It's so simple to when you think about it and you say, you know what? That is absolutely right. I want you to understand something. Okay, Europe has little to no resources. Completely. I think Ukraine was the most resource-rich country in Europe. I believe Ukraine was. But now, Ukraine, we don't even know if there'll be a Ukraine if it keeps going this way. And
part where Russia is, was the part that had the
Resources.
Russia is today is the one that had all of the minerals,
the fertile land, and the resources. Now, check this out. I want everybody to put this on your mind for a second. Now, Africa, Latin America, and Asia has all in the Middle East, which is what used to be considered as North Africa. Most people don't know that North Africa and what they call the Middle East now is North Africa, but it was
West
considered
Asia.
to be West Asia. West Asia, but you know, colonialism and they changed everything. But we'll go into that on another time. But you can do your research and find out about this stuff. What I'm saying. But check this out. Look at the scam. Now they go into these countries and tell them, listen, I got a deal for you. If you sell me your resources, I'll give you this amount, this right here, and we consider this as a value of X, Y, and Z. Okay. So the person say, okay, I'll agree with that. And so they, in return for the resources, they give them paper with ink on it, and they give it to them, and say, now we're gonna, and then the people without the resources set the price of what they're gonna give for the resources. Look at this con. The con starts off at the beginning and it goes all the way through. So they tell you, okay, well, this is worth such and such to us, and we're willing to give you this amount of our currency. Now, when they get this, they go back, they take it back to their countries, they refine it, and then they go sell it back at 20 to 100 times the price that they purchased it for from the people who gave them the resources for it. Now, see, there's another con. Now, when you piss them off or you refuse to follow their policies or their dictates, then guess what they do to it? Since after they get your resources, they sanction you and they nullify the paper that they printed and gave to you. So they essentially stole your resources. They didn't pay you for anything. This has been happening over and over again. They've been conning the entire world this whole time, and the con is up, and everybody's starting to see. Listen, I tell people, Vladimir Putin is nobody's fool, and he had to know that they were going to seize or try to seize Russian assets in the Western world. But he was prepared to sacrifice those assets to push forward a plan for the world to de-dollarize. Because if the world de-dollarizes, that takes the venomous fangs out of the snake. And the snake can bite at you, but what good is a snake if it has no fangs and no teeth? What good is it? And when you say, well, it might be a boa constrictor, yeah, it might be a boa, but you can kill that. You can chop the head off of that too. And the defanging of the Western world, the entire Western world, not just America, but the entire Western world, came by de-dollarization, because the dollar is the link with the euro and the pound. Because everybody must remember that the European Union is a U.S. concoction. The U.S. even has voting rights and a representative in the European Parliament. And they dictate to them what they can and can't do and should and shouldn't do, or else they face sanctions. See, the whole Ponzi scheme is being revealed. And it happened when Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met before the sanctions, before the war, and they put into motion, we're gonna expose them for the whole world to see. This is what Gaddafi was trying to do. This is what
Mugabe he wasn't strong enough.
Mugabe was trying to do that, but he didn't have the economic or the military clout. And now we're seeing it. What is it? Sergei Glasnost? Sergei Glasnost, who is implementing trying to put together a financial plan so that the Eastern Bloc can move away from the Western levers of power and the Western world way of running things. Well, his plan is essentially borrowed from Gaddafi's, but no one gives Gaddafi's credit for it, or Mugabe. They were the ones who were talking about this stuff long before Sergei Glasnost even talked about this stuff. Okay, Rashid, I know you want something. I know you have something to say. I'm gonna let you say it, and I'm gonna engage the chat real quick, and then I'll respond to
you. That's what you know. What you was talking about before reminds me of what they said. The Indians sold Manhattan for a few beads. all that land. And what did you get? I got a couple of sparkling, shiny little thing, you know, a couple of peas and stuff. And he think that's of equal value. Never mind letting in the guy who killed your whole society. See, that's the way he is. He once ruled by just taking what he wanted. Strong arm robbery. Just go in there and just slap somebody across the head with a pistol and take it and get it here. It's mine. Well, in this modern day, that's a little hard to do. So he came up with other schemes where he would put a puppet in control and control him through his dollar. But now even that is up. The rest of the world sees.
Hold on, I got to cut you off. I have to cut you off. I got to address this in the chat. I have to cut you off on this one. I have this guy right here, or guys right here, often have something to say. They comment on all of our posts, all our videos. They have something negative to say. Now, for those of you who are listening, I will only state facts. If you get offended by facts, it is not me attacking you. It's me defending myself and defending this platform and speaking facts. Okay. Now, this guy, insane. I'm gonna give you your 5 minutes of fame, but it is not gonna be how you think it's gonna be. You're not gonna be shining. You know, they say shine to, but you're gonna be that it and not the shine. Okay. So you put something up there, death to child trafficking Russians, when the Russians removed the. Now, I want you to understand what he's saying. He's talking about the child trafficking accusations made by the West against Russia. When Russia was removing the children of the Donbass, who are ethnically Russian, they were removing the ones who had no parents or who were killed by the shelling from Ukraine and the Western world. And they were removing them from the battle center to Russia until the parents could be located or identified. So that's what he's talking about. He left out all of this. See, when they want to hurl insults, they don't think about it. So let's go to the second part of what he said. He says, and the third world monkeys that delude themselves into thinking Russian or superpower. Stop right there. Let's go into this monkey accusation. Now, I want you to do a little Google search because I see that at the soccer games in Europe. And listen, I'm not hurling this. You don't hear me insult anybody. I don't insult anybody because but I will address this. According to scientific study, and you can go to the what is it? Science. What is it? Science. There was a science journal about 8 years ago. I never brought this up because I don't insult people. But there was a science journal, and a study was done with the primates, the monkeys, the gorillas, and all of these things like that. And I didn't do the study. These were Caucasian scientists that did the study. Okay. And they said that they found that there was a 2 to 5% difference. There was only a 2 to 5% difference in the makeup of the primate and the Caucasian. I don't call Caucasians monkeys, but a white scientist said that. Now, what this is to show you that I don't hurl insults. Okay? Even knowing that, I didn't say that they're monkeys. You haven't heard me say that, but because you are deluded in who you think you are through your so-called superiority, it lets me know right now that you don't know anything, okay? But go do your research and come back and tell me if I lied to you, okay? Now, the second part of the third part of what you said is delusional, cope, get institutionalized, ziggers. So you calling us, you wanted to be smart and call us. You want me to use the word for you? You want me to use the word? And then you say to us, West Asia is a conjunction of 3 continents, Tard. If you go back, you'll see that Africa was never called Africa until it was colonized. And when the colonizers came there, they wanted to separate those areas, and they didn't really start calling the Middle East until very much later on. That was considered as a part of Africa or West Asia. Fool, you do your research, okay? And then come back and tell me if I lied to you again. All right? This shows me that you just go on service dwelling. You don't read. You don't study. You do this to throw insults, but you're insulting the right one because I can insult you back. I'm intelligent. I'm nobody's fool. And as I often say, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I can guarantee you I'm not the spoon, the fork, or the butter knife. I might be even a Ginsu knife because I'm cutting you up right now live on the air. Okay. Now, anyway, let's go from there and let's get back to this subject. I'm not gonna hurl insults at nobody because that's what people want. When their perspective, when they cannot get over their perspective on you, when they can't validate what they think, they usually resort to hurling insults. Isn't that exactly what America is doing in the Western world? That tyrant, that dictator, Putin. Who, yes, he's certainly guilty of war crimes. With blood running down Joe Biden's back.
Man, no, wait a minute. They jumped in a vat of blood. That Nosferatu have nothing on them. Back. Once again, did Russia bomb Iraq? Did Russia bomb Syria?
What about Yemen? Somalia?
Did Russia bomb Yemen? Did Russia bomb Somalia? Did Russia bomb Pakistan? Did Russia bomb Libya? Had Russia started trouble in Chad?
What about the overthrow of did Russia overthrow Jean Aristide in Haiti? Did he overthrow?
Was Russia in Vietnam killing people? Did Russia bomb up Laos and Cambodia? Here you got the Blampire who's been sucking everybody's blood, saying that somebody else looked like he about ready to lick a little bit of blood off somebody's cheeks.
So, and it won't, but that's how they do. When you're guilty of something and somebody puts the facts out to you, because the reality of what you've done is starting to seep in, you want to disassociate yourself with that reality by putting what you did on somebody else, and that's not going to fly here. We ground that right here.
There's an old saying: you can throw a rock in a crowd of dogs, and the only one that hollers is the one to get hit.
Pow, pow. What is that? That's a mic drop moment there. So again, we did this show on the, and we're going to still be on there, so don't go anywhere. We did this on the fly because we got information maybe now roughly 2-3 hours ago, and it was then we were looking through different news media organizations to see if we could get any confirmation, and we saw some confirmation on RT.com about the fall of Artemis or Bakhmut, the strategic city in the Donbass, where the Wagner group has taken the center of the town and has taken much of the town, and there's only pockets of resistance left. There's thousands of Ukrainian troops there, but they're pretty much and practically surrounded. So
I heard it was 60,000 of them there.
Man, woo. That's why they call it. And notice how, and listen, let's go back to something about what he was just talking about. And I was the insane clown ponies or whatever. That's how they like to project. You know where you get that from, the insane clown posse. But
yeah, I've seen that before. They some funny guys.
The guy has a comment. If we put something on Telegram, he has a comment on it. You put it on YouTube, he has a comment on it.
He could be a bot, brother. He's a bot. That's his job, is to come out and hurl insult. You know what it shows me is that the empire is dying. What is they said? Nebuchadnezzar said, "I am, and there is no other." That's right. He's sitting up there talking about how great he is and that he's a shining city on the hill. And what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar? Right? What happened to him? Come on, Mr. Smart Guy. What happened to the guy who thought that he was the greatest thing since sliced bread? He was sleeping one day, right? And a handwriting on the wall came up and said, "You've been found wanting," right? And who it was that removed King Nebuchadnezzar? We got a modern day Nebuchadnezzar who stirred up so much trouble that he made that guy in the ancient days look like a priest. He's doing all of this trouble, and can't you see his world coming down? Somebody is bringing him down.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit up there and walk around with your head, with your bag over your head, say, I don't see it, I don't believe it. If I can't see it, it's not real. But somebody very powerful is bringing the empire down. Yeah. This is why we have these shows to show you that somebody is interfering with his world domination. Yeah. He can't do what he did 30 years ago. 30 or 40 years ago, he just go and slap somebody around and steal all of their stuff. And if you said something, if you dream of, you better wake up now.
And his fool doesn't know that. And the fool doesn't know that there was one period of time that the world was known as Asia. He doesn't realize that the entire planet at one time was recognized as Asia. So this lets me know that he hasn't done any legitimate research. So, but let's go further on this. I got to go back to something. I cannot believe that they would be so bold to say what they said when they said switching to national currencies is a violation of the rights of American citizens. That still has to sit us just kind of seep in my brain a little bit, because that is so off the cuff, man, that I'm like, really? You mean to tell me
that's
that
the way he feels?
So deluded, so arrogant, and so inebriated on imperialism that you believe that a nation does not have a right to go away from you?
That's right. You don't have a right to stand up for yourself, because you're my subject. How dare you act like you want to protect you and your family? I own back in the feudal days, the king owned everything. If you even went and shot a deer, well, that's my deer. If you drunk some water, that's my water. And who put you in charge? Well, I murdered somebody and said that I was in charge. It's just like America running around claiming that this is the rules based. Whose rules are they? Who gave you the rules? Who put you in charge to have a rule? Every bit of land that you got, it wasn't given to you by the Lord of the world, was it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a pause. I'm sorry, Rashid. I don't mean to talk over you. They keep pausing you on my end. So when I start talking, you get quiet for a second. That's why I interject. But I don't know why I do know why they're doing that, but that's another subject. But not only did she say that, but then she had the nerve to threaten to sanction nations who moved away from the dollar. But listen, you're going to threaten the nations that are moving away from the dollar, forcing the nations to hurry up their move away from the dollar. What? I mean, the insanity of U.S. policies and statements is on a level unheard of.
You know, this sounds like one of them generals in Iran. One of them IRGC commanders. They said they're going to sanction him. He said, if I got any money in the Empire's bank, you keep it.
It's crazy. I want you to think about this for a minute, Rashid. Now, what got us to this moment, outside of your intransigence and your arrogance and your bullying and your war,
and your hubris,
is the way you use their sanctions. Your sanctions is what push people into a alliance of sanctioned nations doing business outside of the dollar. And now that they're speeding up doing it, you say, well, if you do it, I'm going to sanction you. Wouldn't that make you run faster? You can just think about this. You pass by this gate every day, and you pick with this dog, but you like barely running. You like go by and hit it, and you walk a little bit, and you laugh. The dog comes at the gate, woo, 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 and you run a little bit, and you sit over there and laugh. Now, one day you come by the gate, and the gate is open, and the dog comes out there. Wouldn't that make you run faster away from the dog in the yard? The same thing. Wouldn't sanctioning the very cause of the nations moving away from the dollar, wouldn't threatening to sanction them for moving away from the dollar speed up their moving away from the dollar? I'm just asking. I'm just asking.
They can't see this. Once again, I've been ruling the world for so long, I cannot conceive of anybody doing anything other than that. You've been my servant for all these years, and you do what I tell you to do. Never mind if it's for your own interest. You do what I tell you to do because I'm king.
It's a violation of U.S. citizens' rights.
That's right. It's against the, and then he come up with this magna, some law here and some law of 1820 and 816 whatever. All of them laws benefit you, and you came up with all of them. But what happening now? Once again, there's a new day dawning. It's something, and someone is putting pressure to break down his world order.
And look, in the same article, it says, so there you have it. Countries around the world have in fact either stated their intentions to cease accepting the US dollar or have already begun refusing to accept it. The White House has now tacitly acknowledged it. So,
and since this
most
happened,
people don't know
what should you
how
do?
serious this is. Yeah, see, look, most people don't know how serious this is. The dollar is the lifeblood of the empire. The dollar is the lifeblood of the military industrial complex. The dollar is the lifeblood of America's political power and her power to project force and everything around the globe. The more you curtail the dollar and its use in transactions, the more you curtail America's political influence and her economic might and her military might. Because when you're forced to live within your means, you can't run up future deficits like, well, we just gave the military $800 billion. We need a quick what is called the appropriation. We need a quick appropriation bill for another $300 billion. You know, you can't do that when you have to live within your own means. And so,
and she didn't
go ahead.
She didn't put out so much money over the past 40 or 50 years that I'm talking about a credit card, no limits. She didn't sunk herself years ago. It's so much dollar debt out there. What do they say? These derivatives. There's nothing but a bet. That's all it is. And how much? What do you have in assets? Well, I got $5 quadrillion in derivatives. You mean you got $5 billion in debts? Yes.
Yeah.
He got so much money out there that it's worth nothing. And one day, when everybody very soon stop doing it, America, like we said before, the peso will be stronger than the American dollar.
Yeah, and you know,
and then we will see how strong that.
I try to tell the people all of this stuff here about when we're doing when we are looking at this whole moment. Take it in, because what you're watching is the collapse of an entire world. You're watching an entire financial, political, and military order being erased from the histories, from the world histories. Now, but I want you to understand the magnitude of what we're talking about. The greatest military power that has been seen in the last 6,000 years is being weakened through their own intransigence and arrogance. This is what Scripture was telling you about, how God said he would feed them with their own flesh as if it were sweet wine. He would make them inebriated on the thoughts of what they used to be. They would become drunk on the power that they used to wield and the influence that they used to have and the wealth that they used to command. And now we're looking at America fighting, and we're seeing her decline in Ukraine. We're seeing her decline. When did you ever think that you would live to see Iran launch guided missiles like devastating U.S. military bases? When did you ever think that you would live to see that? When did you ever think that you would live to see Russia just beat not just Ukraine? Because remember, Russia is not fighting Ukraine. Russia is fighting the entire Western world. When did you ever think that you would live to see Russia run roughshod over the entire NATO alliance and outproduce them with more advanced weapons, and outproduce them in military shells, outproduce them in tanks, warplanes, everything? Now, mind you, This comes after the collapse of the Soviet Union when Russia was almost on its knees economically in 1991. So now we're looking at a re-emerging and resurgent Russia outproducing and outmaneuvering and outgunning the entire Western world. And for America to think that she can pivot from that and fight the Chinese 1.5 billion people in their own neighborhood, who now has the largest military army, the largest navy, and is about to surpass the United States in 1 to 2 years as the largest air force. You're going to beat them, and they are your manufacturers, the largest investors, your largest lender. And 93% of everything on your shelves come from them, and you're going to wage a war against them. And they have a military industrial complex and a manufacturing capacity that not even Russia can match. Make that make sense.
And then you're not going to fight them close to the American shore. You're going to go 10,000 miles to fight them.
And then you're going to win.
Yeah, you're going to win because remember, the American military is the greatest military in the universe. Even the Star Wars empire would shrink in fear against the American empire, the American military. But it just shows you that she is dying. And what we're trying to show you that this can't be stopped. And even the bot that jumped on there and talking about this, that, and the other, you too gonna feel the crunch of the American dollar falling. Not one person in the Western world will not feel it. Mm-hmm. Not one person. If your dollar is not worth anything, then the empire is dead.
Mm-hmm. And well, I'm engaged in the chat. Hold on one second. All right, let's go back. But I want you to see something which is driving the world mad. I mean, which is driving U.S. mad, and we see her being more and more aggressive. So pay close attention to this clip that we played, but I'm going to play it again. I want you to pay close attention to what is being said. Sometimes when we play something for you and you see us play it again, it is to get your attention because there's something very important that is being said or being conveyed. And a lot of times we'll look at, because our attention spans are so short in this day's environment, I'm talking about around the world, that sometimes you don't get it the first go around, or sometimes you get it and then it just goes from your memory. So right now, we're going to play this clip again, and we want you to pay close attention.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Russia to the alarm of the United States and other Western countries. Days before he landed, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant against President Vladimir Putin in what some have seen as a politically motivated move to undermine the deep ties between the two nations. But the bond between Russia and China is strong. They share close links in the economic, scientific, and military spheres. The partnership in the BRICS alliance and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is deepening. Washington has long opposed Russia-China relations, which it views as a threat to a US-dominated unipolar world. Here's a reminder of some of its previous statements.
Around the world, we face rogue regimes, terrorist groups, and rivals like China and Russia that challenge our interests, our economy, and our values. In confronting these horrible dangers, we know that weakness is the surest path to conflict, and unmatched power is the surest means to our true and great defense.
You can't call them our friends if they're building weapons that can destroy the United States of America, and therefore we have to develop the capability to respond.
Russia and China were also criticized for using their respective positions on the UN Security Council to defend Syria's sovereignty.
We need to change the attitude of the Russian and Chinese governments. They must understand they are setting themselves against the aspirations not only of the Syrian people, but of the entire Arab Spring, the Arab awakening.
But it was Washington that spent $1 billion in Operation Timber Sycamore a covert CIA program to arm and train Syrian rebels to oust President Assad. The US, which has launched at least 251 military interventions since 1991, according to its own government sources, stands accused of hypocrisy.
Both China and Russia, and this is right out in the national security strategy, are two countries that are chafing against this international rules-based order that the United States and so many of our allies and partners have built up since the end of World War II.
Beijing, like Moscow, seeks a world where might makes right, where disputes are resolved by force and where autocrats can stamp out the flame of freedom.
It is almost as if Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Chile, Nicaragua, and the countless other US invasions and involvement in coups against democratically elected governments never happened. And as if Washington doesn't have hundreds of military bases surrounding China while flooding Taiwan with arms. World powers toughened their stance against China and Russia when NATO identified Beijing as a systemic challenge to Euro-Atlantic security and accused the pair of undermining global stability.
There's just no question that China and Russia are both working to divide the transatlantic partners, and we are now very aware, we all have a deeper appreciation of those efforts and are intent on addressing them.
The deepening strategic partnership between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, and their mutually reinforcing attempts to undercut the rules-based international order, run counter to our values and interests.
Returning to today, Washington has ramped up the rhetoric, warning of the defense and security links between the two countries, with the US saying, without providing evidence, that China was preparing to send arms to Russia to use in the conflict in Ukraine.
We're very concerned that China is considering providing lethal support to Russia in its aggression against Ukraine.
But it is China that has outlined a 12-point peace plan for Ukraine, while the West has undermined and opposed negotiations. Beijing was quick to hit back at Washington, saying China-Russia relations are now more important than ever.
It is the US side, not the Chinese side, that is supplying a steady stream of weapons to the battlefield. The US side is not qualified to dictate to the Chinese side. We also never accept the US dictating or even coercing pressure on Sino-Russian relations.
The more unstable the world becomes, the more imperative it is for China and Russia to steadily advance their relations.
While Russia has accused Washington of pressing the West to adopt a hostile approach to the two nations.
In order to pursue their course of domination, primarily in the interest of containing Russia and China, the Americans lack their own forces, which is why they need what they are doing now, not a partial but a complete mobilization of the Western camp. Our relationship with the People's Republic of China, of course, is going through absolutely the best times in the history of this relationship. Our leaders say so. You remember how these relations were characterized by our Chinese friends in their time, that it is not an alliance, but in many ways it is stronger than an alliance.
That alliance has seen the two countries develop stronger economic ties, with trade increasing by nearly 30% to a record $190 billion in 2022. Relations even extend to outer space, with Beijing and Moscow inking a cooperation deal which lasts until 2027. As talks between the two leaders are expected to see more agreements, it is clear that the more the West tries to drive a wedge between Russia and China, the stronger their ties become.
Oh, I guess they knocked Rashid off the air, so I got to add him back in the booth. Hold on, there he is. He's back in the booth. So we see the empire striking out, lashing out, screaming, crying, kicking, biting, spitting, all of that stuff to try to maintain her sway over the world. A lot of people, because of this new reality, this new paradigm, a lot of people who have their whole psyche, their whole life predicated on the premise of Western supremacy or U.S. hegemony, are losing their mind because they don't want to acknowledge the reality of the ground situation in Ukraine. They don't want to acknowledge the reality of the economic situation. They don't want to acknowledge the reality of military peers rising, like China and Russia, and even to some extent North Korea and Iran militarily. Why? I mean, I know a lot of that is rooted in racism and exceptionalism and thinking that they are superior, but I'm saying, why do you think that the rejection is so strong and ingrained in Western leadership and Western think tanks and stuff.
Did you see that on there, that little boy, what's his name, Austin, the might makes right? That's been the Western motto for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
That's been British motto for 500 years, and this little silly boy is sitting up there. It just shows you that he can make a fool out of anybody. And this clown can't see the forest before the trees. That's the model of the empire, or the Western world, is to go. All of the colonial powers from Asia to Africa to America. That's how he made everything he got. He went with the barrel of a gun. Go up to a country, and basically he would go and throw a 45 on the table and say, "You either do what I say, I'll kill you."
Yeah. What came? The Economic Hitman. I got the book in there. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This guy tells his story about exactly what goes on and how America and the Western world, if they find a country that is in a strategic area or has strategic minerals or wealth or something that they look for and the corporations want, first they go up in there and try to bribe them, and then if they can't bribe them, they go up in there and try to make some kind of deal so that later on they can come back and stab them in the back. If that doesn't work, then they threaten them, and if that doesn't work, they sanction them, and if that doesn't work, the media goes into full blast spin mode. That's a dictator, that's a tyrant, and then it gives the Western world justification to go into those nations and take the resources and occupy the nations. Now, I want to ask people this, because we look at Afghanistan and we say America's gone from Afghanistan. Is she really? Because she still drones them, and she still has some kind of people on the ground there in some shape, form, or fashion. You can believe that. I want to ask the people who are listening, how long has it been since World War II? Just give me a rough estimate. 60, 70 years, you want to say that? Has America ever left any place that she's been there? She always comes up with a reason why she has to stay there. She's in Japan. Do you know that 85% of Okinawa is occupied by U.S. bases? Did you know that a Japanese prime minister said that relations between China and Japan would be great if it wasn't for the United States? And he says, and the United States even once threatened to seize all of the Okinawa prefecture if Japan were to sign any peace agreements with China. Did you know that? Did you know that the United States has more than 24 bases in South Korea? Since the Korean War, America has more than 24 bases in South Korea. And do you know that South Korea is roughly the size of Alabama, the state of Alabama?
It shows you that she is not. These countries are not independent.
And also, I wanted to make this point with South Korea, then you can chime in. And also, do you know that if war were to break out on the Korean Peninsula, do you know that according to the agreements imposed upon the defeated South Korean government that relied solely on the U.S., did you know that the United States retains control over not only U.S. military assets, but all of the South Korean military? Do you know that? If that's not occupation, if that's not imperialism, if that is not trying to conquer the entire world, because if you notice when they speak, Blinken, Newland, Biden, Lloyd, when they all speak, they always say Russia is trying to threaten the rules-based order and wants to become more powerful. Why? Who says that you got to be the most powerful person? Who says that you have to be the richest person? Who says that you have to dominate or lead the world? Where's that ingrained in the rights of nature? And if it's not ingrained in the very points of nature, then how the hell can America look down on somebody else that wants to come up in power, wealth? And even if they don't, I'm just using this as a point. Who is to tell these people that they can't ascend to a status that America is at? That is arrogance. That is racism.
That's because I am the sovereign. I'm the king. That's the reason why they can't do that. I said I'm the king. But getting back to what I was saying before, Japan is an occupied country. South Korea is an occupied country. Germany is an occupied country. They don't make no rules on it. They give you the illusion that they can do it. They leaders can't do it. Just like a mayor, a mayor of San Francisco or whatever. He can't do it. He can't go and tell nobody what to do. He's under an occupation. He can't do anything. Germany, as it stands now, Japan is really America. South Korea is really America. Germany is really America. And all the rest of these little bitty countries, even Australia and all the rest of them, they're all together in the Western alliance to try to dominate the world. This is the reason why they have so much trouble, is somebody else is interfering with their rule. China and Russia have the audacity to break out of that and invite others. That's the deal. That's the main thing, that others may decide to go their way. As I said before, when this little country that Britain made called Saudi Arabia, when they people talking about it's time to go, you know the empire is dying.
Go ahead, finish.
No, I'm finished, bro. I'm finished.
So again, and I was engaged in the chat. I was answering someone's question in the chat. So for those who are listening, you have to forgive me. But let me go to another clip. I do want to play this other clip. So pay close attention to this.
Voices of concern over the looming end to America's global financial dominance are growing louder in the U.S., with news channels, usually polar end of the political divide, in a rare show of unity in their anxiety about a reckoning like never before.
The Fed has solved a series of financial crises by massively expanding its balance sheet, almost 12-fold. This only works because of the dollar's unique status. If that were to wane, America will face a reckoning like none before.
Also, it's been backed up by the strength and economic power of the United States and the fact that oil has always been traded in dollars. If that were to end, that would mean the end of the U.S. dollar.
The wave of panic is beginning to grip politicians, too. U.S. Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene warned that if the dollar falls, Americans will face economic problems never before seen in their history.
I warned the dollar would be replaced with yuan a year ago when Washington decided to wage a proxy war with Russia in Ukraine, and now it's happening. The war against Ukraine war is going to plunge Americans into economic woes never seen before in our entire history if the dollar falls. They will be to blame and America will never recover.
Earlier, my colleague Nikki Aaron spoke to a panel of guests about the consequences of the fall of America's global financial dominance.
Well, the sanctions gave it a big boost forward. I think the idea was already in the heads of certain leaders because of the buildup in American debt to the rest of the world due to the large American trade deficit. We can see the two things working: the abuse of the dollar as the world reserve currency and the continuing American trade deficits.
Xi Jinping was recently in Moscow for a meeting with the Russian leader. They talked extensively about strengthening the economic ties between China and Russia. How much of a big deal is this development for the global economy?
I think it is a historic moment. Some of us have been pointing out that with the illegal seizure of foreign exchange reserves of sovereign nations within the dollar system, that was a big warning to other sovereign nations to be careful and not keep their precious wealth stored up through exports and hard-earned, work in US dollars. And that, of course, ultimately what is likely to damage the US dollar but you need an alternative. And that's where the US for a long time has felt quite confident. There is no alternative. The world currency is the US dollar. Well, you can create alternatives. And of course, that's what a lot of countries have done, initially starting with a core group of countries. And you mentioned Russia, China. Of course, that cooperation is crucial. But there is, the bigger group, the BRICS countries, and more countries are joining the BRICS countries. The alternatives are now becoming very concrete and pragmatic.
To what extent do you think the actions of the US and some of its allies, like sanctions, for example, have actually contributed to this global de-dollarization?
We have to be very clear that the US has shot itself in the foot. It has created this situation where countries are in revulsion to American foreign policy and want to get as far away as possible from the US. Strictly from a business point of view, like, why would you want to invest in the US? And when I say invest, I mean, like, work with the American currency or buy American treasuries. Why? Because that is an investment in the U.S. economy. Why would you want to do it? It's a bad investment. Again, the U.S. is a very destructive geopolitical actor, and it's a very carefree, wanton, licentious financial actor. So it's actually a horrible bet, the U.S. We see that the U.S. is unrepentant. Absolutely unrepentant. I had this naive hope that after we pulled out of Afghanistan, that maybe we're going to be finally a constructive actor in the international arena. And then, of course, what do? They start the war in Ukraine. The U.S. is hopeless. I'm sad, very sorry to say that, but pretty much a hopeless case. And I welcome the rise of new blocs across the globe. That would be great for the global economy.
So we hear that. And I want to follow that up with something with and this is off the Economic Collapse blog. And before I do that, I want to preface it with this. I want you to think about how deranged and sociopathic and psychotic the leadership in the US, Britain, and the EU have to be. They don't care about the lives. They pretend they play a good game and they say, well, we're about human rights and we're about the sanctity of life. They say that a lot, but you judge a person by his actions and not just by the words. And we can see that the policy actions show that they would piss away or allow for hundreds of thousands of people to die to put over their policy objective. Let's look at just Ukraine for a second before I read this article. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Africa at this moment. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Latin America at this point. We're not going to even talk about what's going on in Asia due to policy objectives and moves by the Western world. We're going to just stay with Ukraine. According to some estimates, Scott Ritter, I believe, and Colonel McGregor and a few other people, they're saying that the Ukraine may have lost anywhere from 150 to upwards of close to 300,000 people. I'm talking soldiers. This doesn't include the killed civilians on both sides, and about the 10,000 or so killed Russians and the people in the Donbass. This is all done for America to institute her policy of full spectrum dominance. I want to hold the barrel of a gun to Russia's head so that she can never challenge me in power, and I'm willing to piss on the EU, the UN, Africa, Asia, Latin America, all for this. And I want all of my henchmen and all of my minions to fall in line, or else I'm gonna strip them of their wealth and they'll be on the chopping block too. The megalomaniac mind of these people. And so don't for one instance think that what is going on is not about dollar supremacy and dollar hegemony. And don't for one instant think that the reason that Britain is tied to the hip and the EU are tied to the hip is because the British pound is tied to the dollar and the euro is tied to the dollar, and all of their economic prosperity from Britain to the EU and America comes out of dollar domination. Don't you ever forget that. So now let's go to this. The dollar is in trouble. This is the title of the article. The dollar is in trouble, and it has an exclamation point. It says, here are seven signs that global de-dollarization has just shifted into overdrive. Now we understand why, and this article comes out today. It came out today. And now we understand why Jean-Pierre, the spokeswoman for the White House, then threatened to sanction the nations who dared leave the dollar for their national security and economic interests over with the global South, led by Russia and China and the BRICS nations. But let's go into this article.
Wait. 1 second before you start. I wanted to ask, once they leave the dollar, what are you sanctioning going to do to them?
Nobody asked that. Let's go into this. For decades, the US dollar was the undisputed king of global currencies, but now dramatic changes are happening. China, Russia, India, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and other nations are making really big moves, which will enable them to become much less dependent on the US dollar in the years ahead. This is really bad news for us, because having the primary reserve currency of the world has enabled us to enjoy a massively inflated standard of living. Once we lose that status, our lifestyles will be much different than they are today. Unfortunately, most Americans don't understand any of this. Even though our leaders have treated the stability of our currency with utter contempt in recent years, most Americans just assume that the dollar will always reign supreme. Meanwhile, much of the planet is preparing for a future in which the US dollar will be far less important than it is right now. Let me read a little bit more of this. It says, the following are 7 signs that global de-dollarization has shifted into overdrive. Again, remember what the secretary, the spokesperson for the White House says. She said, let's go back. I want all of this in your mind while I'm reading this, so that you can understand why they're waging war. Okay. White House spokeswoman Karen Jean-Pierre was asked when the Biden regime was what the Biden regime was doing about countries switching away from the US dollar and using their own currency as settlement of foreign trade. Her response was stunning. Quote, this is the quote: switching to national currencies is a violation of the rights of American citizens, unquote. The White House then threatened with sanctions those countries that refuse the dollar in mutual settlements. Now let's go back to the article I was just reading, okay, about the dollar. Number 1, the BRICS nations account for over 40% of the total global population and close to one-fourth of global GDP. Well, that is wrong. The BRICS nations account for more than 1/4 of global GDP when we use the metrics that are used by the IMF and the CIA, and that is the purchasing power parity. That is what counts. Not all these made up numbers. What you can get for your money, that's what counts. Okay? So if they're not talking about purchasing power parity, ignore them. But let's go further. It says, so the fact that they are working to develop a new currency should greatly concern all of us. The deputy chairman of Russia's State Duma, Alexander Babovkov, said on March 30th that the BRICS bloc of emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is working on developing a new currency that will be presented at the organization's upcoming summit in Durban. Now check this out. Remember, that summit is coming in, I think in August, I believe it is. So expect a lot of trouble, expect a lot of terrorism, expect a lot of destabilization process going on in these nations and the surrounding nations, because they are telling you that you are to expect a currency, a unified currency or financial system that they're going to present to each other and to the world at that summit that is going to take place in South Africa. Go ahead, Rashid, and then I'll read a little bit more.
Also, remember, 9 countries are trying to line up to be a part of the BRICS, and a lot of those are America's lackeys. Everybody want to jump on the BRICS. Nobody want to jump on the American side. Everybody leaving.
Now let's go further. It says the transition to settlements in national currencies is the first step when we see all those nations doing that right now. The next one is, and I'm quoting what is being said, the next one is to provide the circulation of digital or any other form of a fundamentally new currency in the nearest future. Remember the Chinese digital yuan and the big splash it made? They didn't do that by accident. All right. That's the second step. Now it says, I think that at the BRICS Leaders Summit, the readiness to realize this project will be announced. Such work are underway, Babovka said on the sidelines of the Russian-Indian Strategic Partnership for Development and Business Growth Forum. Babovka also stated that a single currency could likely emerge within BRICS. And this would be pegged not to just the value of gold, but also to other groups of products, rare earth elements, or soil. Remember, China has a lot on rare earth elements. China has 92% of the mineable rare earths. This is no coincidence, I'm telling you all. So let's go further. And China is one of the biggest gold, well, we know Russia is, and we know that China also is one of the biggest gold buyers and gold miners in the world. Now let's go. It says number two. Two of the BRICS nations, China and Brazil, have just reached a deal to trade in their own currencies. The Chinese renminbi, which is the yuan, is speeding up in expanding its global use, a trend that will help build a more resilient international monetary system, one that is less dependent on the US dollar and more conducive to trade growth, experts said on Thursday, excuse me. They come in it after China and Brazil, two major emerging economies and BRICS members, reportedly reached a deal to trade in their own currencies, ditching the US dollar as an intermediary. The deal will enable China and Brazil to conduct their massive trade and financial transactions directly, exchanging the RMB, which is the renminbi or the yuan, for the reais and vice versa, instead of going through the dollar. Agence France Press reported on Wednesday, citing the Brazilian government. This means that America would not have a say in the trade, the transaction, nor would she get a piece of the pie. Let's go further. Number three. During a meeting last week in Indonesia, finance ministers from the Asian nation, I'm not talking about ASIN, I'm talking about ASEAN, ASEANS nations, discuss ways to reduce dependence on the US dollar, euro, yen, and British pound. And you know what they have done quietly? They have been doing a lot of their trade in the Chinese yuan or renminbi. But let's go further. It says, an official meeting of all of the ASEAN finance ministers and central bank governors kicked off on Tuesday, March 28th in Indonesia. Top of the agenda are discussions to reduce dependence on the US dollar, euro, yen, and British pound from financial transactions and move to settlements in local currencies. The meeting discussed, and I want to stop right there, they're getting rid of all of the hegemonic tools that the United States and the West uses to prop their economies up on the backs of others. And remember, ASEAN, ASEAN, is a grouping of Asian nations in an economic pact. And guess who's the greatest economic partner to them? And who's their largest manufacturing trade partner and investor? You got 2 minutes. You got 2 seconds. China. So if they're going to do trade in a local currency, guess what currency it's going to be?
Also,
Go ahead, Rashid.
Also with this China and Brazil, remember, Brazil, Argentina, and several other Latin American countries, they got a pact among themselves. So in essence, China is doing a pact with them other countries also.
Right. Let's go a little further. It says the meeting discussed efforts to reduce dependence on major currencies through the local currency transaction scheme. This is an extension of the previous local currency settlement scheme that has already begun to be implemented between ASEAN members. Now, let me tell you something that skated across the radar. There are African nations that are in a pact together to do currency trade agreements and to have a free trade zone between African nations that will not use the euro, the dollar, or the pound. That's skated under the radar. Now let's go further. It says, number 4, in a move that has enormous implications for the petrodollar, Saudi Arabia just agreed to become a dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Not only is Arabia trying to become a member of BRICS Plus, but Arabia is trying to get some military muscle back in it so that the United States won't overthrow them by joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
This is only makes a lot of sense. You see, who is the Saudis afraid of? Iran. Who has the most influence over Iran? Russia and China. So if you want to curtail that, hook up with them, and then they'll be able to reel in Iran when she gets mad. You can go to them, but you can't go to the empire and tell the empire to go tell Iran so. Iran will ignore you. It only makes sense. Everybody, me and the brother trying to tell you, the emperor has no clothes. Everybody sees her as she is. She's not powerful. She has no riches. Her day is that she is not a delicate somebody that everybody, a nice pretty girl sitting up on the hill and everybody then been hoodwinked and oh my God, look at it. No, she's a horrible, hideous looking harlot that nobody wants to have nothing to do with.
Let's go a little further and get these last 3 things out of here. This is the state-owned Saudi press agency said that in a session presided by King Salman bin Abdulaziz, the Saudi cabinet on Tuesday approved a memorandum awarding Riyadh the status of dialogue partner in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a political security and trade alliance that lists China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and 4 other Central Asian nations as full members. The Asiatic nations are the ones who will lay her low. Let's go further. The organization further tallies 4 observer states, including Iran, and 9 dialogue partners, counting in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. It is headquartered in Beijing and served by China's Zhang Ming as Secretary General. Number 5, let's get this. We got to get this. And this is very important, number 5. The Chinese just completed their very first trade of liquefied natural gas that was settled in Chinese currency instead of in US dollars. Wow. Check this out. It goes further. China has just completed its first trade of liquefied natural gas, LNG, settled in yuan. The Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange said on Tuesday. What do y'all think that China was doing setting up all these exchanges over the years? And let's go further. It says Chinese state oil and gas giant CNOOC and Total Energies completed the first LNG trade on the exchange with settlements in the Chinese currency. The exchange said in a statement carried by Reuters. You know, Reuters is a British, I wouldn't say news agency. I say propaganda agency. I would say that.
Like somebody in Russia said, called the BBC, the British brainwashing channel.
Yeah. And it says the trade involved around 65,000 tons of liquefied natural gas imported from the United Arab Emirates, another U.S. token nation. And it says the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange added. Number 6. Here we go to number 6. The government of India is offering their currency as an alternative to the U.S. dollar in international trade. And all of a sudden, remember how the United States was taking India's side with China? And all of a sudden, when this took place, the United States starts talking about India's human rights and violation of these laws and this and that.
And next thing you're gonna have Al Qaeda gonna show up at their front doorstep, or Boko Haram or somebody.
It says the government of India is offering their currency as an alternative to the U.S. dollar in international trade. India will offer its currency as an alternative for trade to countries that are facing a shortage of dollars in the wake of the sharpest tightening in monetary policy by the U.S. Federal Reserve in decades. Facilitating the rupee trade for countries facing currency risk will help disaster-proof them, Commerce Secretary Sunil Bhatwal said during an announcement on India's foreign trade policy Friday in New Delhi. Number 7, here we go. Number 7. Saudi Arabia has actually agreed, listen to this good, and this is very important because I bought this currency years ago and followed it because I kept telling people that you have to look at resource-rich nations, not people who claim to be rich, but look at minerally and resource-rich nations when you're talking about investing and stuff like this. So I have this currency, but I want you to listen close to this. Saudi Arabia has actually agreed to accept Kenyan shillings. I have the shillings in there as payment for all shipments to Kenya instead of U.S. dollars. Kenyan President William Ruto signed an agreement with Saudi Arabia to buy oil for Kenyan shillings instead of U.S. dollars. Now, Kenya has a lot of resources. Kenya has a lot of all African nations have a lot of resources to be mined, most of them. So, that would be a good investment to get into some of that currency. I know it looks like they're poor, but in reality, Europe is actually poor. Latin America is not poor.
Oh no! Don't say that. Say it ain't so. She. How many times do she tell you that I am rich? Listen good. I am rich. I am the richest country on the planet.
But look, it's not just America, it's Europe. Listen, everything is tied to this dollar. I continue to tell you this. These resource-rich nations, a lot of people don't understand, and I'm going to say this again about the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. We talked about the aqueducts and what he was trying to do with the water reserves that the Western world did a survey and found out that Libya has some of the largest underground water reserves on the planet. And what Gaddafi was going to do is use those water reserves to turn desert into fertile, minerally rich land to form and become the breadbasket of Africa in the world. That was one of the things, because that was one of the first things that they bombed when they bombed Libya. But another thing is that had the gold dinar taken root, which it was about to, overnight, the economic and geopolitical landscape would have changed, because what Gaddafi was proposing, what Mugabe was proposing, is to back the gold dinar not just by gold, but by all of Africa's unified riches, which would overnight have dethroned the dollar and dethroned the euro, and this would have reduced these countries to less than what they are right now, and elevated Africa. And with a racist mind, they could not have taken that, so they wanted to get rid of Gaddafi so that this would not happen. But instead, when they did that, they thought that they could do it again, and Russia and China had other plans because they had the military muscle to rebuff what the U.S. was trying to do. Okay, so we're looking at that. But again, let me read the last little bit of this number 7, and then we'll talk a second, and then we'll close the show out, because this was supposed to be a short 30-minute breaking news over the fall of Bakhmut or Arkiamas, and the Wagner group they have captured pretty much most of the city of Arkiamas.
Wait a minute, brother. How can those drunken Wagner prisoners,
right?
Those criminals, all of them are drinking, raping everybody. How can they have the military might to whoop that? Because remember, the Ukrainian army was trained by NATO.
And
matter of fact, they said that the Ukrainian army was the strongest
in Europe.
Strongest in NATO, because they were backed by all of NATO and trained within NATO tactics. Yes. And to get whipped like that,
it says, as the U.S. currency exchange rate hit 145.5 shillings due to increased demand by importers, President Ruto accused oil cartels of stockpiling American dollars in response to the crisis, sparking fuel shortages throughout Kenya. 10 years ago, none of these things would have happened, but now change is happening at a pace that is absolutely breathtaking. At this point, John Carney is warning that a fracturing of global currency reserves is inevitable. It's not only a serious threat, I think it is inevitable. We went through 3 stages, as you said. After World War II, the U.S. was the biggest economy in the world. In the 1970s, global banking became basically dollar central. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the entire world more or less came under the domination of the U.S. dollar. That is now drifting away. China and Russia are starting to build an alternative block of currency, John Carney explained Sunday. Sadly, I agree with him. As U.S. relations with both Russia and China continue to go downhill, both of those nations will have a very strong incentive to push de-dollarization even further. And that is really bad news for the United States, because our currency is the source of our economic power, and it is the most important thing that we export. This is a story of monumental importance, but unfortunately, most Americans still believe that our leaders know exactly what they are doing and that they have everything fully under control. In essence, what he is saying is we're living in the fall of America. This is what he's saying in essence, that this is the fall of America and the decline of the dollar. We're living in this in real time, and that the nations have gotten hipped to America's game, and they now see the house of cards, and they not only see that the dollar system is a house of cards, they're now blowing against that house of cards. And now you see card after card falling from the top to the bottom. Isn't that right? We're watching that. Go ahead, Rashid.
We are taught that it's going to come a day when you'll be able to take a whole wheelbarrow full of American money down the street and won't be able to buy a loaf of bread. Those days are very, very close. And for the poor fool that sit up and want to make fun of what we are saying, just stick around a few days, fella. Just stick around. And then he just laughing now. Let's see you be laughing when it falls.
Yeah. On that note, we go out the same way we came in, with love. Go join all of our platforms on Odyssey, Twitter, Twitch, Locals, Rumble, YouTube. Hit the like button. Please hit the like button. Keep us in the algorithm, all of that stuff, and support us in any way you can. We love you. Spread the word about the platform, but always remember that God will love you best. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous, because righteousness is the only thing that is going to get you out of what is coming to America and the world at large. And on that note, I got to say, as I always say, Mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everyone. Love you.